In the previous video, I shared how I filmed forest videos for the National Museum of Finland. My goal was to capture landscapes from a perspective of a person living in the Stone Age. In this episode, I face new challenges trying to capture landscapes of ancient waterways. I made 3 trips to the islands of Lake Päijänne. I wanted to experience the world the same way ancient people might have, from the view of a canoe. The journey turned into a series of revelations, and it wasn't until the 3rd trip that I began to understand something deeper about making nature films. After midsummer, I set out with my friends to explore suitable filming locations on the Lake Päijänne in Finland. I chose a quiet time to avoid the holidaymakers on the lake. In this area, Stone Age settlements and rock paintings have been discovered. When looking at the area from a broader perspective, you can imagine how ancient humans experienced this place. Certain landforms must have had great significance. We traveled slowly with open minds and arrived at the place that felt sacred. 2 black-throated divers seemed to guard the spot. At the boundary between upper and lower worlds, above black water and beneath the white sky. This experience was completely unexpected. I filmed the divers from low angle and using the camera's flip screen. The slight moisture on the surface of the water softened the image. In a canoe, space is limited. So lightweight zoom lens and camera's in-body stabilizer were ideal choices. Sure, photographing birds would be easier from floating height. We spent several days on 3 different islands. I sat for long periods in the places I had chosen, immersing myself in the surroundings. I realized how easy it is to forget the environment when you spend peaceful time in the nature with a friend. Although the place might initially seem barren, with a little to photograph, like birds, they gradually begin to appear and even come close. This often happens when you simply sit still even if you're chatting with a friend. My best nature photos have come when I have spent long periods in one place without high expectations. The light weight of my gear brought joy and freedom to the filming. By taking advantage of the best features of my camera, heavy equipment wasn't necessary. At first, I focused mainly on technical aspects, but gradually deeper insights began to emerge. When photographing birds from a canoe perspective in a place like this, a thought arises how ancient humans might have seen the landscape. It's easy to imagine how the figures moving on the lake inspired artistic and minimalist interpretations. There's a feeling that you want to carve the figures moving on the ripples of the water onto a rock face. The movements and shapes of the birds almost seem to scream symbolism. Humans haven't changed over time. Even ancient people understood the importance of beauty and art. When a canoe begins to move, the mind awakens in a whole new way. The person sitting in the canoe starts to observe the moving landscape as it were a movie. What awaits beyond the next headland? I would be overwhelmed if I see a painting on a cliff. I returned to filming locations in July. However, I faced challenges. People had taken over the peaceful coves, and the lighting wasn't ideal. I decided to wake up early in the morning when the lake was quiet. The lake showed signs of fish nets, and there were footprints of people and dogs on the shore. Landscape videography requires patience and careful planning. For example, cumulus clouds, which only form later in the morning, quickly change their shape. I learned that filming long video is better done in small segments and by looping. Unlike usual, I didn't use an ND filter, but instead I chose circular polarizer to reduce reflections. I set the camera aperture small to keep the image sharp as possible. You don't always need to aim for cinematic look with a shallow depth of field, especially when the image needs to be sharp and have details. On the third trip, I truly began to understand how important it is to deeply understand the subject being filmed. Often, in filming projects, we stay on the surface, but only by experiencing the world through the subject's eyes, you can see things in new light. I realized that my previous trips were just getting to know the subject. At the end of the summer, I arrived at the new island when holiday season had ended. In the evening, before going to sleep, I cleaned up the last traces of people from the shore, so that it was easier to start filming a pristine landscape in the morning. The late summer night was warm, and sleeping in the hammock was a pleasure. I spent a peaceful night listening to the gentle lapping of the waves. In the morning, when I started filming, I already knew quite well the challenges of the landscape. Traces of human activity were still visible, but not as much. I searched for curving lines in the shoreline that would suit the shot. Landscape video follows the same principles as still photography. Leading lines, framing, and composition bring depth and interest to the image. Gradually, I began to understand that I was only taking my first steps in the nature filmmaking career. Only now I did realize how important it is to deeply know your subject. A concrete knowledge of the location and subject helps you to choose the right angles, frames, and shots. You need to live, breathe, smell the sweat, and taste the life of your subject. These are the elements that create the right atmosphere. I felt a mysterious atmosphere while walking on the shore. It was as if the spirits were following the shoreline in the woods and along the coast. It was exciting to think that the islands visible on the horizon in the lake have been same for thousands of years. And the shore I walked on was the same one where the people once waded. Children dove in the same clear waters. It felt comforting to think that we are part of the same chain of time. This is so beautiful place. I can't believe it. My experience was unique, but at the same time it was easy to achieve. When you study the subject carefully and focus, you can immerse yourself in its world. And then everything related to filming falls into place.